Hello, I'm Barbara Armentrout, and I'm glad so many of you could join us today. We are doing our fourth installment of Aplusify's AMS Roadmap for Association Executives. As mentioned by Venu, this will be recorded and you'll get a copy later in the week. Our chat feature is open and we encourage you to use it to ask questions, offer suggestions, or if you have any success stories you'd like to share. Venu and I will monitor it throughout, and we will try to work it into the flow if it's not going to be disruptive to our panelists. Otherwise, we'll get back to them later, and we'll do our best to answer all questions in the next 60 minutes. Over the summer, our roadmap took us to some great places. Moira Edwards helped us find the right AMS for your association. Then Gretchen Steenstra and Kathleen McQuilkin showed us how to kickstart your AMS. And Rebecca A. Church helped us visualize a busy but productive life after launch. Today's session will have 2 panelists and 3 parts. We're going to start with a big picture, then open chat and Q&A. The topic today is both timeless and timely, getting your data right by optimizing your AMS. And that includes software as well as human resources. Optimization is timeless, and you'll leave today's session with a great checklist and lots of ideas you can put to work tomorrow, no matter how old or new your system. And that includes rethinking such things as the reports that you always run because that's the way you were taught to do it. But optimization is also timely, especially when many associations are dealing with not new, not now. Many of us, especially those whose industries might be suffering cutbacks, are postponing investing in a new AMS. You might be dreaming about data visualization and analytics in your shiny new Speedster, but the fact of the matter is you're still driving the old minivan after the kids have moved beyond soccer. But we'll help you soup it up with some affordable sweat equity. Panelist number 1 is a living legend in our association world, Wes Trochlil. Let's switch over the screens as we welcome Wes, President of Effective Database Management. Wes has worked in and with more than 200 associations and nonprofits throughout the US, Canada, and Australia during his more than 30 years in the association community. Along the way, he has become the most published author on data management in the association market. Panelist number 2 also has a strong and growing following, and he'll chime in after our self-assessment segment. Neeraj Garg is Aplusify's Chief Operating Officer, and he has logged more than 20 years in the world of associations and nonprofits. He works alongside a multi-talented team to drive digital transformation and enable an organization to be more innovative, agile, and donor or member-centric. He leads an internal task force that shares lessons learned, best practices, and practical applications. Wes, please launch us into the self-assessment guide. And I want to remind those listening that yes, you're going to get a copy of this later. So give the screens your full attention, and we hope your full honesty so we can get some good answers. Remember, in a Zoom world, nobody's looking at your paper. So this is to help you. Wes, can you take it away?
Absolutely. Thanks, Barbara. When I work with my clients on any kind of data management project, at some point during the project, somebody is bound to ask a question similar to this. They'll say, are we the most dysfunctional organization you've ever worked with? And my response always is no, because there can only be one worst, but some of us have more trouble than others. And so the more frequently I got that question, I realized, associations, I have the benefit of working with hundreds of different organizations, and so I can see across the spectrum in terms of how well associations are doing with their data management. But if you're working in an association, you probably don't have that kind of perspective. And so I put together this very non-scientific Cosmo quiz that I'm going to ask you to take with me here that will help you to kind of rate yourself against associations, broadly speaking. So I'm going to ask 9 questions. You can see the response options here are yes, sort of, or no. So it's just yes, sort of, or no to each of these 9 questions. And then at the end, we'll score them and we'll compare them to what my experience has been with other associations. So question number 1 is, can you easily and accurately tell me who your best customers are as you define them? So if I say, give me the top 20% of your customers and members, who are they? Can you grab that information quickly and accurately? Yes, sort of, or no are your responses. So again, keep track of this because you're going to score it at the end. Number 2, Can you easily and accurately tell me how many messages you've been sending over a given time period, like a week or a month? So if I say in the last month, how many messages have you sent to your members and your customers? Can you easily and accurately answer that question? Yes, sort of, or no? Third one is your key data, your critical data, housed in a single location so that you can easily access that? So that could be your primary AMS, that could be a data warehouse or a data lake. And I'm talking about key data here. That doesn't mean all data, but the data that you need access to, is that in one place, or do you still have critical data housed in multiple sources?
And
So
index cards and Excel spreadsheets don't count, right?
Well, I'd call that a no, yes. So yes, sort of no on number 3. Number 4, do you have documentation for your business processes? If I came into your organization and said, how do you process a new member? How do you process renewals? How do you process an event registration? Do you have that documented where you could actually give that documentation to me? Yes, sort of, or no. Number 5, do you have a process for capturing non-financial interactions? So presumably you are capturing all your financial interactions, because if you're taking money, you need to have a record of that. But how about non-financial interactions, tracking volunteers, tracking other interactions? Do you have any kind of process in place for capturing those? Can your members and customers easily do business with you via your website? Which of course means, can they join online? Can they renew online? Can they update their profile online? Can they purchase products and join your certification program? Whatever it is that you sell at your organization, can your members and customers do business with you via your website?
And is that what we think is easily because we set it up, or is that what the customer thinks is easily?
Yeah,
Big difference.
Different discussion, yes.
Yeah.
All right. Number 7. So the data that you're gathering on your website, does it flow directly into your database, or does it require some kind of intervention? If you've got forms on the website, are those forms feeding that data right to your database? Yes, sort of, or no? Can you tell me how many volunteers you have? Committee members, speakers, writers, room monitors, any types of volunteers that you are keeping track of. Can you tell me how many you have? And then finally, can you easily and accurately tell me your lifetime value? Are you able to calculate that based on the data that you have collected? So those 9 questions. The scoring looks like this, very simple, just like the Cosmo quiz. Give yourself 2 points for every yes, 1 point for every sorta, and 0 points for every no. So you could have a low of 0 if you answered no to everything, and you could have a high of 18 if you answered yes to everything. So your score is going to be somewhere between 0 and 18. Add that up, and I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. This is the only math, I think, for the rest of the presentation. And then I'm going to ask you to tell me via the poll. I think, can I turn this on?
Yay, we have poll.
So if you want to tell us how you scored, we don't know who's submitting what, but tell us how you scored, and then I'll tell you how that compares to what my experience has been.
And I guess at this point I sing a little song. I give people, ooh, look at those scores coming in. Okay. Well, I am delighted to say no one scored 0.
It's encouraging. All right, we're doing good. Give it a few more seconds, and I think we'll stop it. Okay. So we'll end it here. Barbara, you can see that on the screen as well?
I can see that, and I know
Okay.
Dave Schulman has joined us, so I think I know where one of those high scores is coming from.
So as we look at the polls, we can see that just 1 out of the respondents, or 8%, scored a 17 or better. A third of you are in that second tier, and fully 60%, or 2/3, are in that second tier there, or the 7 to 12 points. So that's how we look. Here's how, again, based completely on my non-scientific evidence of my 20 years of consulting, if you score in the 17 and 18 range, you're doing as well as any association I've worked with. You might have something to learn here, so don't leave me. But you can see that very low score based on our responses here. If you scored in 13 to 16, I think you're in the top 10 or 15% of all associations, again, based on my experience. It means you've got really good control of your data. In fact, I was talking with a previous client of mine just last week, and they had an assessment done by another consultant in terms of their data management, and that consultant scored them very high on their management. They're probably up in the 17, 18 range. So if you're even in the 13 to 16 range, you're doing really, really well. Now, 7 to 12 is where I see the bulk of associations, and of course, that's exactly what we saw as for the people attending here today. Again, this is not bad, and a part of this is to give you perspective, because my sense is, based on my experience with my clients, those of us who are in the 7 to 12 range feel like we are failing. And my point is that you're not really failing. If you were truly failing, probably your association would go out of business. But you do feel the pain, you feel like you're struggling, and again, hopefully some tips today will help you move you into that 13 to 16 category or even higher. And then if you're in 0 to 6, you're in bad shape, but no one here was like that, so I think we're all right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that, again, just designed to give you some perspective on where your organization sits when it comes to data management. There's something to keep in mind as we talk today, as well as when you think about data management within your organization, and that is that with data management, it's not one thing, it's three things. The first one, of course, is the people. You've got to have the right people in place doing the job. I recently had a client who told me we were having trouble in this certain area, and the more we talked about it, the more we realized he actually had a staff person who just did not want to do the work. And the best technology in the world will not solve that problem. So people usually is the least common issue, but it can be an issue, so just be aware of that. Process, of course, is another key element of the three-legged stool here. You've got to have the right people doing the right things. And we're going to talk a lot about process today because that's a big focus of optimizing a system. Because the third leg here, of course, is your technology. If your technology is terrible, you will have challenges even if you have great people and great processes. Where these three intersect is where you're going to have your ideal operations. And again, our focus today will be on processing technology, not so much the people, but you've got to have all three of these. If you've got great technology, but your people don't want to do the work, it cannot help you. If you have great technology and good people, which most of us do, if the processes are bad, you're still going to have challenges. And of course, if you've got good people and good processes, but your technology can't do what you need it to do, then obviously technology is the issue. But I would argue that 60% of the time, when there is a serious challenge internally with managing data, it is more a process issue than a technology issue. So since we're talking about optimizing, the question, of course, is why wouldn't we just buy new technology? Well, one of the obvious reasons I want to just stated, technology isn't necessarily the answer to your problems. If you've got decent technology in place, it's probably a people or process issue. Another reason is simply budgets. We're in very unique times right now, and a lot of associations are having to reevaluate where they're spending money, and you may simply not have the budget to actually purchase new technology, which means you've got to emphasize more of the people in the process and rely on those to improve where the technology might be lacking. And then finally, it's feasible that you have a fairly new system, say within the last 2 to 5 years. I always advise my clients that your AMS should last a minimum of 7 years and probably over 10 if you treat it well. And I've had plenty of clients who have lasted 10 to 15 years in their systems. But if you've purchased a system in the last 2 years, you may not be in a position to, again, from a budget perspective, to actually implement new technology. And frankly, you probably don't need to if it's new technology already. Okay, and then one last thing I want you to keep in mind, and this is really, really critical, and that is there's no stasis in data management. What I mean by that is your data is either getting better or it's getting worse. There is no middle ground there, and you can think of it this way. What I have here is what I call the cycle of doom for data management, and that is that the data is perceived as bad. That's why I've got the scare quotes there. The data is perceived as bad. It may be bad, but it may not be. But it's perceived as bad by the users, which means in turn they set up their own shadow systems, spreadsheets, other databases, whatever, and they manage the data there, which means that the data in your primary system is not being updated, which means that the data will get worse over time. And so
Without taking us too far in a rabbit hole, what kind of data are you seeing as bad when people have these shadow systems? What is the kind of situation where that tends to crop up?
Well, the obvious one, or I would say the most common one, is a bad email address on a board member's record.
Ah.
So as soon as someone sees a bad email address on a board member's record, they instantly make the assumption that the rest of the email must be bad too, because if we're not taking care of our board members, we're clearly not taking care of our other members. That's a perception issue. It may or may not be true. Mm-hmm. But so bad email is one of those that tends to trigger it most. In the good old days, Barbara, it was actual bounced mails, snail mail. If you got a whole bunch of returns, then people would freak out and say the data's bad.
Yes. Okay.
So the flip side of that, of course, is what I call the virtuous cycle, and that is that we've got very high quality data. It's being well used by the staff for marketing, for communications, and as a result of the use of that data is continually cleaned, which means the data is high quality and it continues to be used. And so if you think about these two cycles, take 2 seconds and think, where does your association fit? Because you are in one of these, whether you know it or not. So either your association is struggling and your data is getting worse, or you've got enough good processes in place to keep that data relatively clean. You're in one or the other. That's a critical thing to keep in mind as we work through this. Okay, so how can we improve how we manage our data internally? I'm going to give you 5 tips over the course of the session here, and Niraj is going to show us some technology that can help us with this as well. And so the first tip I would recommend is that you review all of your business rules. Business rules are what guide how we manage data within the organization. And so business rules isn't only the data goes here, when it comes from here, it goes to here, but although that is important. The business rules also are, how do we do things? How does a member join? What are the rules around a member joining? Rules for renewal, event registration, your certification program, all those things that guide how we allow people to use our products, those are business rules.
And I think those are also, sorry to interrupt, but I think those are also including, I've been on associations where they had business rules for membership models that were no longer active.
Precisely. And so that's exactly the point, which is business rules accrete over time. And so you may start a new program today and have 3 business rules for the program. Within a year, you're going to have a bunch more rules for that program. And in 5 years and 10 years, you're going to have even more. And I'm going to give you 2 honest-to-God real examples. Clients of mine, I will not share their names, but they know that I share these stories. The first was an association for lawyers. And it was a very specific type of lawyer that would join this association. And they had a rule that only these types of lawyers could join the association. And that's perfectly fine if you've got rules around who can be a member and who cannot. Nothing wrong with that. And so what this meant was they had an application process. You couldn't just pay and join. You actually had to apply first. A committee would review your application, and if you qualified for membership, then you would receive a notification with your invoice. Then you would pay your invoice, and then you became a member. The problem that the association was having at the time was, for some members, this could take 60 days between applying for membership and actually getting into the association. 60 days. Now you think about our age. Does the average person want to wait 60 days for anything?
We don't wait 60 seconds.
Exactly. We are the instant gratification generation. And this was a problem. And so I suggested to the association, why don't we do this? Let's do the application process because you have to. The committee still has to review it. But let's take payment for the membership as soon as they apply. So when or if the committee approves membership, then we can just immediately flip their membership from applied to active. And we don't have to send them another invoice. We have to wait for all that. And the membership director said, no, you know, we tried that once a long time ago. Our refund process is really painful. And so we don't want to send invoices or take payments from people that we have to refund later. I said, well, I guess I get that. So I'm just curious, how many new members do you get a year? And she said, it's about 50 new members, individual membership organization. And I said, okay, how many did the committee reject last year? And she thought about it for a second, and she got kind of a wry smile on her face, and she said, 2. I said, okay, so we built a rule to avoid refunding twice a year. And she said, yeah, that doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense. But that's not something that someone just sat down and said, we're doing it this way. That developed over time.
And as a marketer, I would, instead of refunding those 2, I would want to give them, you know, something instead.
Right.
Registration for the credits. Conference. Yeah.
There you go. Use those credits. Great. Yeah, there's awesome ways to deal with all that as well.
But you write a business rule instead. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to look at those business rules. Just another great example, again, because I can't make this stuff up. I worked with an association. It was an individual membership organization, but they had a membership model that said once you reached 3 people from the same firm joining the association, then that kind of became a company membership, even though it really wasn't. And the first 3 paid the usual fees. Let's just say it was $200. But that also meant that the 4th person would get a discount. It'd be $150. And then the 5th person would be $100, and everybody after that would be $100, which is fine, I guess, also. But the problem that creates one of the problems it created is that when a new person is joining, they have no idea if they are 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or something else. They can't tell that just by joining online. And so the staff has to get involved in terms of setting the right price. That's the first problem. The second problem is, because if you think of these as slots, the top 3 people pay $200. If one of those 3 or more drops membership, then the others have to move up. And if they move up, their dues may change as a result of that move. But the association has to keep track of which slot that person's in. So that's another challenge, especially during renewal when my $150 dues now is $200. But here's the kicker. In addition to all those rules, if you're from Massachusetts, the rules are different. I'm not making that up. Massachusetts, it's 6 people, not 5 people. So if you're from the state of Massachusetts, the rules are similar but not the same.
I'm guessing the president was from Massachusetts the year they put that through.
You are 99% accurate. The rule for Massachusetts is because that's where the association started. It was created in Massachusetts, and so they had their own set of rules. But yeah, so again, the point.
And then if you add internal politics into that, there are certain positions well, I'm the $200 member, you know.
Absolutely. But the point being, the larger point, every association has these issues. Look at your business rules and really think about what can we change to simplify our lives. And in the case of both the examples I gave, to simplify the members' lives. Making those rules easier would make that easier for them to join and renew. And what we're looking for is to make everyone's life easier. And so managing the data that's related to all this, the harder your business rules, the harder it is to manage. So don't create your own challenges by creating crazy business rules. Now, Niraj, did you want to?
Well, I just wanted to emphasize the point you just made with the people listening, because many of our folks listening are more in the IT and tech department, so they don't author the rules other than to execute on them. And they're going to be going to people in the membership, professional development. They're going to be going to people in other departments asking to change or to consider changing some of these rules. I think the point you make about it makes it easier for the staff, but it really serves the member. It makes it easier for a member to perform the action that they want to perform. So that's the rationale to take with the other departments when you're mixing in their business.
I think that's a key point. Niraj, did you want to add something here? Or is it after the next slide? I think you're muted.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Niraj, or should I go on, or did you want to add something here?
No, you should go on, Wes.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Second tip, this is kind of a combination, so we'll call it tip 2A and tip 2B. The first one is to review your reports, and the second one is create data integrity reports. And so review reports, what I really mean here is look at all of the reports and queries that you have saved within your system and think about which of those you can get rid of. my experience with my clients is any of them who have had a system for more than a couple of years, and of course it gets worse the older the system is, the more reports they have. And every single staff person will tell you, I only use 3 reports. I only use 5 reports. I only use 6 reports. Yet somehow they have 700 reports in the system. Every one of my clients faces this. It's a natural extension, again, of the accretion of things that happen over time. So look at the reports and queries that you have and clean out the ones you don't need. And the reason I say this is I'm a big believer in weeding the garden, which means making sure there's nothing ugly in your system. There's no screen noise or data noise that will cause people to think this system is crappy or the data is bad. Because remember that virtuous cycle versus the cycle of doom. A big part of that is perception. How does the staff see the data and the technology? And if they perceive it as good, they will use it. If they perceive it as bad, they will avoid it. And again, one way to address this is look at those reports and queries. And I'll tell you this also, probably to a client, those who have done this will tell me no one ever noticed that those reports went away. They'll go to the list and say, I can tell. Some systems actually will give you a report that shows if you've used those reports in the last X days. You remove those, hide them, or delete them. Staff doesn't even notice because they're only using 2 or 3 anyway. Related to that, data integrity reports. These are, so my first tip is clean your reports out. My second tip is start creating new reports. These new reports are designed to help you identify potentially erroneous data. That's what a data integrity report does. And so what's a simple example of that? The @ symbol is required in an email. If you don't have wes@trochlil.com, if you don't have an @ symbol in there, it is not an email address, plain and simple. Some systems might allow you to enter non-email data in an email field. So you could write a query or report that would say, show me any record that has data in the email field, but is not showing an @ symbol, because we know that is bad data. So that's a simple example. More complex examples that my clients have used. I had one client who had membership, both domestic and international. So if you were a U.S. company, you got a domestic membership. If you were a non-U.S., or in their case, non-North America, you got an international membership. But if staff were processing that data, it's possible that a U.S. company could get an international membership and vice versa. So those errors would occur. And what my client did is she would run a report once a week and say, show me any U.S. company with an international membership, or show me any international company with a U.S. membership. And right away she knew she had bad data and she would clean that up. Again, just a simple example. And that list can go on. Chapter leadership, if you're missing chapter leaders. Every chapter should have a leader. If it's blank, that means we've done something wrong, or it means they need to fill a position. But in any case, you should know that. Expiration dates don't match join dates, things like that. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do. And again, this is all about weeding the garden to make sure that you have as little bad data, in air quotes, as possible, because again, we want to improve the perception of the data with our staff.
And remember, when we're weeding the garden, sometimes we may pull up something that somebody else would consider a lovely growing plant. But if it's not what we want and need, it's a weed.
Right. Yeah, well, I'll talk about that a little bit later for sure.
Okay.
Niraj, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. I think, just let me share my screen.
Yay, there we are.
So I think, Wes, you made a very good point in the sense that either your data would be bad or it would be good, and there is no way in between, right? So it's not that you have a middle way that some of the data is bad, some is good. And I think we have encountered that with most of our clients, where most of the issues that we have got in reports is more about having inconsistent data, bad data, duplicate data. And like you said, like you should have data integrity reports. But the question is,
uh-oh, did we freeze?
Uh-oh, did Niraj freeze?
You're just about to make the good point, Niraj, and we froze.
most of the times client come back to us and say like, oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I'll just repeat it. Most of the times that we have got report issues from our clients, most of the times it's more about not the reports, but the actual data that is being pulled in the reports. And I will show you a live example of how we have done a data progress for data cleansing activity for all of our clients. So just give me a second. So here you can see, like, this is one of the dashboards that we have. And what we have done is we were doing this, pulling out the data integrity reports that you were talking about, Wes. But the problem is when we talk about data integrity reports with our clients, right, they cannot actually visualize like what these reports look like. So what we thought was to actually make a kind of data cleansing dashboard for them, something like this, where if you see, you have got these visual representations of all these contacts which have missing addresses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have all these 1.1K contacts which have missing addresses. Now these are the status values that we have for different states in which they are in. Now you can actually drill down into these reports and see like what records are we talking about, because sometimes there are records which are like exceptions for the business, right? And they don't want to change it. So this actually gives them a very visual representation of what they want to change, and actually gives them an idea about what data cleansing activity are we doing. Because it's very tedious for the users to actually go into the database and understand what data is all about, what data is we are talking about. So I think if, so you can go here and maybe just click here and it will actually give you a set of records, right?
And I'll just mention that our client NAFME does know we share information about them, and they're fine with that. We haven't fully anonymized this.
Oh yeah. And we have spent a lot of time building these dashboards, and it has proved very useful for them, because see, you can get these kind of reports, right, where they can actually see like what records are we talking about.
And I'm guessing right now with the pandemic, a lot of associations are maintaining suspended memberships or memberships that are in an unusual exception state because of the economic situation.
Sure.
So this is a good one.
Yeah. And I think with these kind of dashboards, if we can have a collaborative session with the business users in understanding like what records they want to correct, what addresses they want to correct, we can actually have a collaborative effort to fix them, and then and see like data cleansing activity or getting rid of bad data is not like one-time activity that has to be done. It has to be a continuous process, and it has to be audited, right? Because you are going to enter the data in the system regularly. Your users are going to enter the system, and you cannot have a control on what they are entering, right? Sometimes they would be entering valid data. Sometimes they would obviously be entering data which is inconsistent, right? An example, maybe there may be a text field to enter a country name. So someone might be entering USA and some might be entering US, right? So obviously both are correct, right? But in terms of database, these two are like very different, because when you go on seeing the data, it's like inconsistent because the format is not the same. Mm-hmm. So I think these are the kind of problems that we face regularly from our clients. And if we can actually build these kind of dashboards and show it to them, half of the problem is solved, because we have actually given them a visual representation of what needs to be done. So I think
I'll just say I have a very minor question. I assume we can influence the color scheme on these dashboards?
Oh, obviously, yeah. So they are all customizable.
I know some board members who would respond well if it's in the association's colors.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Active yes. In one, yeah.
Yeah, obviously. Colors can be customized, right? Everything can be customized. These reports can be customized because, And these reports will change with time in the sense that you may have certain more reports that you can add to this dashboard because they are just components which you need to add.
Mm-hmm.
But we have found a lot of value that it adds to our clients, and it has worked well with them in terms of data integrity and making them understand what we talked about. Because there is a difference in the level when the business users are talking to the technical team, right? So talking bad data to them, talking about not consistent data, not valid data, sometimes does not make sense to them unless they actually view what is actually wrong in the data. So I think this is maybe how we can actually build in data integrity reports. And I'm not sure, like, Wes, what do you feel about it? Like, is this right way to do things, or we can have more options to do it?
No, I think this is excellent. There's a couple of reasons this is really great. One is in the dashboard interface, it actually allows you that drill down capability to get to the records that might look bad. So that's huge because that saves steps for the staff. Another thing is that these dashboards are omnipresent so that the staff can look at them at any time. They don't have to execute these reports once a week. They don't have to necessarily clean it up every minute, but at least it's always there and ready for them. So working with your vendor, or if you can do it internally, developing these dashboards or reports so that they're easily available to the staff is really, really critical. So this is a great example.
And some of them are board ready because we want to be careful what we feed to the board, and we know they can visualize easier than pages of Excel reports.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's rightly said that if the data is visualized, right, the problem is already halved, right? So 50% of your problem is solved if you are able to visualize things. Because unless you visualize them, you cannot rectify them. And I think that is the main problem with all the data management activities that we do. And based on our experience, that is what we have found out. And this is the best way I could find to get a user buy-in to do all this activity. Because if you go on and tell a business user, like, we need a data cleansing activity, then he said, like, oh, what is that? Why do we need a data cleansing activity, right? So unless he actually goes and visualize what the problem with data is, it's very difficult to convince them.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
Okay. So the next tip then is to eliminate shadow systems. And I kind of touched on this at the beginning. Shadow systems are any quote unquote system that staff has set up that's outside of the primary system. Typically they're spreadsheets, but it could be other online databases or an Excel or an Access database. But the point is they are actively managing data outside of the system. Mm-hmm. And we need to stop that, because what often happens is they manage the data in their system, but they do not update the data in the primary system. The most common offender is the person who manages committees and boards. They will almost invariably pull that list out of the database, put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and then manage all that data in the spreadsheet, never updating the primary system. And the fact is that data is in one place, so you need to go around your organization and find where people have these shadow systems and do everything you can to get staff to move that data back into the primary system.
But you've just pointed us to a political third rail. The person managing that kind of data is often in the C-suite.
Oh, I see. Yes, that's true. They usually have many excuses for why they have to do it that way.
Yes.
And so
but
my
again,
response
improving the experience is the reason we're doing this.
Right, right. Niraj, did you have anything to share on this one?
Yeah, just to add on to it, Wes, so I will again share my screen.
And while he's doing that, I'll say I'm surprised, Wes, you didn't pull out the meetings department as one of the examples.
Oh, yep.
So I think that is a valid point because we have also found that people are used to using their old systems because old habits die hard, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to get them out of what they are comfortable with, right? And any change is like everyone wants to resist that change, but they still want the things to be there, to be seen in one dashboard. And if you don't have got these systems eliminated, right? So you will have n number of sources of data, and obviously when you have n number of n sources of data, so it's very difficult to get accurate information from different systems pulled out and being seen as visible in one report. So I think there are just two ways on how you can eliminate shadow systems. There will be other ways as well, but two prominent ways. One is you implement your AMS and you actually try to integrate your other systems that you might be using. So you might be using a Salesforce Sales Cloud. You might be using a accounting system. You might be using your own SSO or maybe another document management system, right? So unless you try to integrate them in AMS, it's very difficult to have that one holistic 360-degree holistic view of what the things are. And I will just show you live. So here you see, like, we have got all these dashboards pulled up. But if I go here, and you can see that obviously this is we are using a Fontiva system, right? But you can see that we have got Sales Cloud also integrated with it. We have got membership system integrated. We have got the SSO integrated in the same system. We have got a document system called SDocs, which their client was using, and we tried to integrate it. So if you see this dashboard, right, it's more of a unified view of all these systems. So you can actually go to your events app and you can have different tabs here, right, which are relevant to your customers or your members. So it's just one dashboard which you can view to have a view of everything that you want to, right? So you can go to your events here. You can go to your campaigns. If you want to go to your opportunities, you can actually go to the Sales Cloud here. And yeah, so you get all your opportunities, leads, right? And you can just go and view them. So obviously, and I will just show you a report as well, a dashboard, which actually is quite helpful in helping us understand, like, why do we need these integrated systems right here. So we have got this renewal dashboard made for our client. Now this pulls in various reports, right? So you have your total membership count, you have monthly renewal by type, you have monthly renewal by state, and then you have this finance information where it talks monthly payment by type. Now, unless you have your finance app integrated with your AMS system, right, you cannot get this kind of dashboard built into your system. Similarly, you have got all other reports here where you can do your analysis. Now, the key to getting this dashboard is to integrate all these systems so that you have one single source of data through which you can pull these reports. And when the senior management actually wants to view it, right, they just go to this dashboard and they can see, like, what is the analysis, how many members are active, how many members want to actually pay by credit card, through e-checks. So this can only happen if you get rid of your shadow systems. Otherwise, if you are just using your old systems, old Excel sheets, then the data would stored be, everyone will have a different Excel sheet in place, right? So, and they would be stored in Google Drives. And when the management wants that report, everyone will have a different report to show them. So I think this is the kind of advantage that you get, and you can do a lot of analytics and research and a kind of prediction in terms of, so like this dashboard that shows the membership that are going to expire in next 90 days or so. So maybe you can run a campaign for your members to just send them an email of, like, their membership is expiring and they want to renew it. So this can only happen if you have got one integrated system in place.
Right.
Thanks. Okay. Wes, we got some more tips.
Yes.
There's so much.
the next tip, and this is one of my favorites because I think most associations are really missing a huge opportunity here, because this does require some thinking and some process development, but there's huge value. And that is to think about what non-financial, non-volunteer interactions you're currently having with your membership that you should be tracking. So I'm emphasizing here non-financial because, again, we should be tracking all our financial interactions already. I'm not talking about volunteer interactions because, again, my assumption based on my experience is that most associations do track that as well. So what I'm talking about is other interactions that have high value to the association and ultimately to the membership. And one of my favorite examples comes from, just to illustrate what I mean, comes from the organization BoardSource, who was a client of mine some time ago. BoardSource, some of you may be familiar with them or even be members. Their mission is to help you as a nonprofit better manage your board. And as a result of that, they develop all kinds of material and information about managing your board, all in a bunch of different areas. And one of the membership benefits they have is that you can contact them. We used to call it, phone consulting, but no one uses the phone anymore. You can reach out to them via email and ask a question. And if you're a member, they will respond to that question and give you as much information as they can about what you're seeking. Now, because it's a members-only benefit, of course, the first step from the staff perspective is to look up the record and say, is Wes a member? Mm-hmm. If I'm not a member, of course, the response is going to be, this is a members-only benefit. Here's how you join. Here's the link to join. And as soon as you join, I can answer your question for you. But if I'm a member, the next thing they do, of course, is answer the question, provide me with the information that I need, and they capture that interaction in their membership database so that and categorize the type of interaction it is. I'm sure it's the type of question it is. So they capture that Wes contacted us about board fundraising, and here was the information we provided. And the reason I love this process and why more associations need to do it is because simply by virtue of capturing this data, BoardSource is receiving 3 immediate benefits from having that information. The first is that they are getting real-time information about what their members are concerned about. And I'm emphasizing real-time here because in my experience, what happens in associations when we say, what are our members concerned about? The response is, here's what I heard last week. And
or last conference.
Yeah, or the last conference. And so they're not getting real-time data. The second thing is, by virtue of capturing all of this data over time, they can see, again, what their members are concerned about, and they can compare that to their products and services mix to see where are the gaps. Are members asking us questions that we actually can't provide information about? And if we can't, does that mean we need to develop a new product or service to address that? Or is that actually outside of our mission scope and therefore we just leave it blank? But in either case, we have data that says, here's what our members are interested in. We have data that says, here's what we offer. And we can compare those two and say, do these match or are there gaps we need to address? And then the third benefit is, by virtue of collecting this data, they are passively creating a marketing list that can be used anytime in the future. So if someone is asked about fundraising in the last 6 months, and we've got a new fundraising product to promote, when I create that email and send it out, first I'm going to grab that list of people who are interested. Second, I'm going to personalize that marketing message that says, Dear Wes, in the last 6 months, you asked us specifically for help on fundraising. And guess what? We've got a new offer that addresses that need. As the recipient, do you think I'm going to open that and read that?
Oh,
of course I am, because that is not a dear member, here's another thing we do. That is, Dear Wes, we know this is of interest to you because you contacted us about it. That's going to resonate, and that's going to get me to respond.
And when the team is putting together professional development and convention for the following year, just imagine if the IT team could say 5% of our members asked about this topic. Why don't you create a session for it?
Exactly. So much value there. You do have to design this and set up your system. I'm going to turn it over to Niraj to talk about this. But you've got to set up your system so you can actually capture that information. But once you've got that process in place, that it creates tremendous value for the association and by extension to the members.
Yes, but having it captured and searchable is essential. Okay, I'm going to do a quick time check. We've got about 9 minutes left.
Thank you.
I think Wes has already explained very beautifully about this interactions. And I think for every member, if we want to have a long-term relationship with them, it's good to have that kind of personal touch with them so that they don't feel that they are just glued to a system. We should tell them that we actually care about them, right? And we understand about their interests, what they want, and the system is actually able to provide them. And for that, many AMSs do provide custom forms where you can actually capture information, not just about their financial transactions or about their memberships. It's more about knowing them. So like you can, as you can see in this, one of our clients, during their joining process, they have designed their custom forms, which actually captures the teaching levels of the teachers that are joining in, so that it helps them to understand them, what their teaching levels are, and if they want to actually provide content to them, right, they can actually provide them based on their levels, right? You cannot just provide any content to anyone. And maybe you can capture demographics so that many associations do have many chapters running across the country, right? So if you specifically know which region they belong to, you can actually provide them sufficient information on what events are being organized in that particular area, what are the content that is being provided by that particular state. So if we can do that, I think that would provide much more valuable interaction with them, and they will feel valuable being in the system. I think one of the things that keeps them engaged is maybe give them some kind of batches. So maybe for their anniversaries, you can, as you can see, like you can say, like, we will provide you a batch, and they can accumulate those batches, and maybe then you can give them some discounts on the merchandise or maybe on the membership that they renew. So because another thing, like, it's all visual, right? So if you see we have collected 5 batches, that means you are actually associated to the system and actually associated to that kind of association. So I think if we can capture these kind of interactions, and these are easy to do if you just need to talk to your technical team and design some custom forms and some custom fields to capture that information, and that is it.
And badges are great because it's fully automated, but it feels very personal to the person recipient.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So last tip I will share with you is to leverage your users groups. And I'm pointing out here that you should have both an internal and an external users group. If you are using an off-the-shelf AMS system, chances are good there's an external users group available already that you can join if you haven't already. Some charge, some don't, but even if they charge, it's worth the money to get to know other users outside of your association that are using the same software that you're using. There's tremendous value in asking others how they do certain things, because even though the vendor, quote unquote, understands the system, they're actually not using the system, generally speaking. They're not using the system the way you are as an association. So getting that perspective from other users is really critical. Mm-hmm. But the other thing I always recommend to my clients is creating an internal users group, which is a group that meets on a regular basis to talk about what's going on within your organization in terms of data management. And so that means representatives from all the key departments are meeting, again, on a regular basis to talk about what's working, what's not, what new initiatives are coming down the road. I worked with a client once several years ago who was having really significant issues with managing their data internally. It was a 50-staff organization. They basically had membership and accreditation as 2 primary business drivers in their organization. They were using the same shared database, but what was happening ultimately was that data was being changed on one side that would affect the other side, and they just didn't know what was going on. Mm-hmm. And literally to the point of where the staff said, data is disappearing. Well, data, generally speaking, doesn't disappear from a system. It's usually removed from the system by a user, and that's exactly what was going on there. But what happened was they set up their internal users group, and within 6 weeks had basically settled about 80% of the fights they were having, because they were actually talking about what was going on. In their case, they were using a primary contact on both sides of the organization without realizing that the other side was using that primary contact as well. And so accreditation would change a data point, and membership would say data is disappearing. Or membership would change data, and accreditation would say data is disappearing, when in fact they just didn't realize the impact that one side was having with the other. And so by having these internal users groups, they were able to work that through, again, without a technology change, without changing people, anything like that. It was simply opening those lines of communication.
And I would think having somebody from finance in a users group could be very helpful too.
Absolutely. It should have representation from all the major departments, and finance usually is a major department regardless of the size of your organization.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Now,
go ahead.
So I guess we have just a minute or two here, right, Barbara?
Yes, we've not gotten too many questions coming in, but on the users group, we're asking really, really busy people to take time to go to meetings.
Yep.
What are some of the benefits that would be there for a busy IT person versus the fallout if they don't?
Right. So for a busy anyone, it's that we're going to be able to eliminate some of the reconciliation challenges that we invariably have. So in fact, this idea came to me when I was a membership director 25 years ago, because what was happening was my membership team would have to meet with the accounting team once a week to do reconciliation on the money.
Oh, I remember those meetings.
Our team was making mistakes, and that was causing trouble for the finance department. So finally, we just started having these meetings every week to narrow down what was creating these problems. And by doing that, we actually created less work for both sides because they had to reconcile one or the other. And usually, like in the case of my client, usually having these meetings, you're right, takes time, but it eliminates all that downstream pain, which usually requires much more time than investing time up front.
And having two departments key in the same data, you're guaranteed to get a mistake on one end or the other, just because it happens.
Yep, just because it happens.
Yes. And I loved the reports talking about the receivables, particularly the one that Niraj was showing with how many people are paying by credit card versus check. And I know, Niraj, you said e-check, but the fact of the matter that we learned during the pandemic was a lot of folks are still paying their dues by paper checks. And that was creating a huge problem for association staff who weren't going into the office. And if they went into the office, they didn't necessarily want to go to the bank. And that would be a great report to show the finance department for why they should adopt credit card payments. I know many associations don't want to pay the fees, so they don't want to do, and then, they have to keep the credit card numbers up to date, but great way to have a snapshot of what's going on with your members.
Yeah.
Okay. Wes, you had made a point at one time, may not have been in this one, but you were talking about returning to baseline and the crazy business rules. What is a good way for somebody to start returning to baseline? And I'm asking this right as we're trying to close off, so I hope it's not too open-ended a question.
Well, if the organization is interested in returning to baseline, then the first thing they need to do is engage the AMS provider to talk about that, because pretty much every provider has some kind of program in place to allow for that. And so you can talk with them about what that entails, how much that's going to cost, how long that's going to take. But the value in returning to baseline is that over time, you may have developed workarounds or even custom development to address something that was missing in the system earlier that now exists because these systems are constantly updated. And so returning to baseline gets you back to a place where you can use the baseline functionality, which means you get better support from the AMS provider, and it's easier to use for the staff themselves.
They're probably happy when you bring the car wreck into the mechanic and they're able to put it back into running shape.
That's right. Fix this.
Yes. So do either of you have any final words of wisdom you want to share with our group before we log off for today?
I would just say that, as I said at the beginning, it's people, process, and technology. And if we're not really touching the technology much, then we've got to focus on those other two, assuming you've got people who care about what they're doing and they want to do a good job, which most of us do. Then it's all about the process. And we've talked a bit about what those different processes are, or that you could be looking at within your organization that could really elevate how you manage data.
Niraj?
Yeah, I think so. I agree with this because these three things are very critical because they have to work in collaboration to get these things done. So when I was talking about data management, it's not just about technology, it's about people as well, because people are there to tell you like what reports they want and how they want it. So unless you know how they need it, there is no point in developing n number of reports and then just fussing about it. So I think process, people, and technology, they have to work together to get things done.
And I think everyone would be delighted to identify a bunch of reports they don't need to run anymore because nobody wants them anymore.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you. And let's thank Wes and Niraj. Give them a round of applause. Thank you for sharing the information. And I want to remind everyone in closing that there are free resources on the Aplusify website. And we have lots more webinars and recordings of prior webinars if you want to grab them. And we're working on our 2021 webinar series and invite anyone to pop us a note with suggestions on topics you'd like covered to help in your real life work every day. And we are, whoops, I just spotted one more question that popped in. Let me see if we can do it. This is from David Schulman. It's not a question, but I will bring it up because he is always be innovating. And I don't think that's a question. I think it's an excellent comment on how we should approach this. So I thank you all very much. And we will see you again at one again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.